have yet another dramatic weekend in college football. Some great games, especially as far as endings down the stretch as the day was able to wrap it up. But a lot to get to, including Texas absolutely annihilating Oklahoma. Some notes on OU's offense, the Oregon-Ohio State thriller, Penn State's comeback against USC, and then the LSU ending when it looked like they were dead and buried to score to tie and then win the game in overtime. And, guys, Iowa State, BYU, Arizona State, and K-State in the Big 12 get it done.
Yeah, Arizona State was dominant, like physically dominant over Utah on Friday night. Iowa State and BYU are for real. It was a crazy weekend all the way around. I don't know how many. I didn't watch a single really bad game this weekend after the 11 o'clock window was over. Like once that window was over from 2 o'clock on was just badass game after badass game. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a really good weekend, a really entertaining weekend.
Hold on, we can't hear you. Got it? Go ahead, Craig.
No.
Okay.
I'll be over there.
All right. Yeah, it was unbelievable. Some great games down the stretch. The Big 12, these teams did flex their muscle in Iowa State with their win at West Virginia. They just eventually wore them down. BYU with what they were able to do, of course, with a huge audience watching them. Arizona on Friday night. Kenny Dillingham, of course, and the fans going nuts after their win. And then K-State going into Boulder, back and forth. Looked like everything was fine, and then here comes Shedeur and company. Although a game that Colorado may have lost some stars, and I don't know if this week or the next week or two, as some teams, again, are trying to win the battle of attrition as well. Here is Max Olson. There's a couple of notes here. Oklahoma's offense, they had no chance. As soon as Texas scored and took the lead 7-3, you're wondering, okay, unless this game ends up like 12-7, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do. Hawkins couldn't do anything. They can't run the ball. Texas overwhelmed them. OU's defense, even though in the end gave up 34 points, in the end, you could still see what they have there. But Texas with so many different weapons. Oklahoma's offense generated 13 plays of 20 yards or more this season. That is 133rd out of all the FBS teams. Only 0-5 Kennesaw State has fewer 20-plus gains as far as on offense so far. And then here's another nugget on Oklahoma. This is from Chris Vanini. From 1965 to 2021, Oklahoma scored 3 or fewer points against Texas just once. From 1965 to 2021, Oklahoma scored 3 points or fewer in the Red River rivalry just once. And now it's happened twice. Nothing 3 years ago. Loaded, but they haven't even looked the same. So I don't know what's going to happen, but right now they do appear to be, and with all due respect to Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, and what Dan Lanning has in a huge win against Ohio State, that was dramatic too. I don't know. I mean, they can have a bad day, turn it over multiple times. I mean, play around with their food, and you never know what might happen. But we will get to all of that and much, much more. Are we good to go now?
Yeah. Craig, can you give us a test?
Test 1, 2.
All right, let's go to Craig now. Craig, your thoughts about just overall. Joey McGuire is going to join us at the bottom of the hour. Ari Temkin from the Big 12 Radio Network at around 3:45. Craig?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of great games this weekend, a lot of fun, a lot of crazy finishes, and, yeah, I mean, just a lot to unpack. So I guess let's get in the process of doing that. Obviously, you mentioned Oklahoma there. Not thrilled by that outcome, not surprised. Felt like at least Michael Hawkins gave them a little something different that hopefully could open some things up for them, or at least give them a little bit of a jolt from time to time that Jackson Arnold couldn't do by throwing it to the other team too often. But clearly they're just a mess far beyond any player, any position, and It's very interesting to hear a lot of Oklahoma folks over the weekend pining for the days when they had great offense. And remember when we had all those great quarterbacks? Like, yeah, that was a different staff. That was a different guy. That's the one that you've, rightfully been complaining and wishing the worst on for the last couple of years. Not your fault you lost that guy. He made that choice, but just interesting to kind of hear the reflections on what was not that long ago, and to hear so many who now talk about Texas and see this massive gap that maybe is as big as it's ever been between those two in terms of talent level and just the strengths and weaknesses. So Texas, I don't know who's going to beat them. Maybe Georgia this weekend. That's not out of the realm of possibility, although I don't think we're all that overly impressed by Georgia. But I mean, they have a shot, and we'll see beyond that, but they're very, very good and rightfully the number one team in the country right now.
And in the past, they might have won a game like that, dominated Oklahoma. They have now won, it's like 11-6 the last 15, 18, whatever amount of years. But they could win a game like that and then trip on their tongue. Sarkisian seems to have them locked in emotionally, physically, and focused. That doesn't mean they might still not have one of those days, but they look so good.
Well, we need to see what happens when they play a team that can match them with offensive weapons. That has not happened yet this year. I'm not blaming Texas for that. It's just, they have not played a team. Now, this week they have Georgia. That should be that's a team that can match them weapon for weapon more than anybody else that they've played so far. And their two tests have been Michigan and Oklahoma. Both those teams are built on their defense, do not have a ton of offensive weapons. So we'll see what happens to them and how they respond to being in what could be more of a scoring match. But even then, they just look so complete right now.
Yeah, no, they really do across the board. It was almost like the one thing you could pick at was the fact that Auburn, who's always been so money when it comes to kicking, missed a field goal. But even then, they look really good. Oregon, Dylan Gabriel and company with a nice win, a great win at home as they storm the field, as they get excited about beating the Buckeyes in what was a classic game as one of the best matchups perhaps the rest of the year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I had flashbacks to Will Howard against Texas last year in that last drive where, just made – a couple bad decisions, especially the one right there on the last play of the game. And, for better or for worse, Ryan Day in these big games does not have the best track record so far for Ohio State fans. But these are the only ones he loses. I think you would, if you asked, a lot of college football fans, would you love to win almost every game you play except for the times occasionally when you play a team that's as good as you are? They would say yes, but Ohio State, they won a title again really, really badly. And it's been a decade since that happened, since the very first CFP, and he hasn't beaten Michigan. He lost here to Oregon. It doesn't really change their status all that much, but he's going to have to deal with the headache for a little bit.
Yeah, it was an excellent game. Autzen seemed like it was rocking. Just a very cool atmosphere, I'm sure, to be a part of for everybody there. And a fun road trip for the Buckeyes that's now a conference footprint. So that's pretty cool, too. And I'm sure that was super enjoyable to know you're going to have a game like that, a trip like that every few years or so, and vice versa. And it lived up to the billing of 2 versus 3. I thought it was an excellent and entertaining game. And there at the end, Will Howard looking like a guy who K-State looking like he's moved on well and good, and K-State moved on and everybody won. And, then at the same time, there's this massive mistake at the end that just kind of tarnishes everything because, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing or thinking? And I couldn't help but just feel uncomfortable for him as he was laying on the turf, realizing that he just ran out the freaking clock with his slide. I just was speechless for a second watching that game. Did that really just end how I think that just ended? And I think everybody probably felt that way. And I'm sure it wasn't maybe so much quiet on Ohio State fans' ends. They were probably screaming bloody murder watching a game end like that. But, yeah, beyond the conclusion of it, all the rest of it was peak college football, especially for somebody who didn't have any skin in the game. So that was awesome, save for just the decision there at the end, which I'm sure has been really tough for Will Howard to have to deal with. And so we'll see how the Buckeyes pivot from that. But a brutal way to lose a game. And at the same time, you went toe-to-toe on the road, and you're among the best in the league, and your season's not over by any means, but wouldn't mind seeing them run that back in the playoff or something like that.
Again, I mentioned Penn State came back. They had a flea flicker to a center, 44, who caught a touchdown pass, and then they won the game. And Alar, was that right? The quarterback, Drew Alar, was very, very good. Drew Aller was very, very good. And obviously USC looked like they had something. The only question mark there is Lincoln Riley with another loss. USC had the ball near midfield, had timeouts left, and it was almost as if they were trying to make sure they got into overtime. They had the ball. And you have Moss, the quarterback. And he even mentioned in the postgame that he just did not want to give Penn State the ball back. Well, eventually, when you have it and you're around the 40 or so, you got to try to do something with that, so he's taking heat for that too.
But they wouldn't have necessarily given him the ball back.
Yeah, I mean, you punt to get it down to the 15-yard line and make him go in 20 seconds. Yeah.
Look, James Franklin is not going to, Anthony Kotelnicki or no, with less than a minute left, and you pin him deep behind the 20, going to get irresponsible. It's not in his nature. So, you're the team you're the home dog here, right? You were down at home, or you were picked to lose at home. You're winning most of the game. Now you're tied. You got a chance to go win it. All you need is about 17 yards to get into field goal range. You've got all 3 timeouts in a minute left, and you wasted 45 seconds of it overall.
Yep.
It was insane.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on with Lincoln Riley. He's lost a little bit of his.
He was very defensive.
Fastball.
I watched the post game from Ryan Abraham's feed, and he was very defensive about it. And people were they were asking him about where they are, and you can imagine he's not happy with it, and also starting to feel, and has, I think, felt that pressure. Also, real quickly, one more game in the top 25, and then we'll get to some of the top 25 teams and what the Big 12 did, because some people separated themselves. Garrett Ross, LSU, with a win. Mm-hmm. Huge touchdown from Nussmeier to get into overtime, and then the touchdown to Lacey to win it. And a big-time win against Lane Kiffin and the Rebels.
No, that was a tremendous game. I mean, that was one where I don't think Nussmeier played his best game. You could go back and you could make a lot of corrections there. I think there were some plays where he had opportunities to run the ball and elected to force some ball in some tight windows. I think LSU's defense played phenomenal, especially Whit Weeks at the linebacker position. He had 18 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss. It was just a phenomenal game. I'm not naive enough, though, to think that if Trey Harris doesn't get injured for Ole Miss, that the Rebs don't come out on top, and if Trey Harris doesn't drop that initial pass. But overall, I think LSU's clicking pretty good.
Yeah, they're in a nice little run at 5-1. Craig, anything on LSU Ole Miss?
Yeah, it was an awesome game. Picked LSU and was feeling pretty down about that during most of that game, as Ole Miss looked to be in pretty good control, but never really separated. And mentioned there's some injuries involved in that, and just the ebb and flow of that game was really interesting, because it felt like it was just Ole Miss's for the majority, and then here comes the Tigers there at the end, and obviously some huge plays. That touchdown pass to send it to overtime was just, that was incredible. And then obviously struck pretty fast there when they got the opportunity in OT. So great win by Brian Kelly and the Tigers. Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night, man. Like that's why I picked them as much as anything else, and it paid off. But very interesting now on the Ole Miss side of things. They have no room for error. I'm sure there will be some argument for why some 3-loss Ole Miss team or something deserves to get in the playoff here in a few weeks if it comes to that. But right now they don't have anything left to give. They got to be pretty careful if they want to get a shot at the playoff, which might not be a big deal in the grand scheme of things when it comes to Ole Miss football, but given all the hype coming into this season, that is a big deal. I mean, there was no shying away from the fact that they were well set up for this year, and this was the year, and they had the talent and all that, and they're 10th in the SEC right now. I mean, it's just a couple losses, but because there's a couple of them, they don't know if they can afford a third now. They basically have to be perfect, and any shot at the SEC championship is dwindling. That was a big loss for Ole Miss and a huge win for Brian Kelly. He really needed that.
I think there's a lot of people around Ole Miss or the SEC or follow college football that kind of say, if not now, when? Well, I mean, when you've built this roster, you've got a multi-year starter at quarterback in Jackson Dart who's really good. You've got Trey Harris putting up Heisman numbers. You went and out and got Princely Uman-Milan, and you got Walter Nolan. You got these guys on defense. You added Plus, like, the only thing you lost was Quinshon Judkins, and Bentley and Parrish have been really good for them in his absence as he's gone to Ohio State. Now, down the stretch, they've got Oklahoma after the bye, at Arkansas, Georgia at home, another bye at Florida and Mississippi State. So this might be their last loss, or it might be one more to Georgia on the surface, but Arkansas is no slouch. Oklahoma's going to want to get back at somebody, although I don't know if they have enough offense. So you never know what can happen in these things, and the Egg Bowl's a rivalry.
We have the Big 12, 3 teams ranked in the top 25, and Iowa State with a win in Morgantown, and they look methodical. Their run game is so physical. They're number 9. BYU is 13. And then Kansas State goes into Boulder and has to, in the end, a shootout when the Buffaloes came back and then Avery Johnson made a play and K-State wins the game. They held Colorado to minus 26 yards rushing in that game. Some sacks involved in that too, but there was no running game from Colorado. So 3 teams among the top 17. It's a heck of a story. Now, Craig, with Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn, the possibility that Hunter with a shoulder injury did not come back. Those are weapons. Obviously, they have Wester and many others, but we got to wonder about Travis Hunter, his injury, Jimmy Horn too, and what that means to the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Iowa State and BYU deserve the most kudos because they're sitting there at the top of the standings right now, and I think BYU in particular has a beef when it comes to where they're ranked. I think they're getting a lot of disrespect right now as opposed to if they were in another conference and sitting at 6-0 and a couple of the road wins that they have, I think they'd be getting a lot more rub, but that is perhaps life in the Big 12. I don't want to make this like it's them against the world all the time because I think that's getting a little bit oversaturated. But I do think that this is an example of where your conference matters and where the perception's a little bit different because I do think BYU is getting a little bit of a lack of respect.
They have beaten SMU, who's in the top 25, and they smoked Kansas State, who's ranked 17.
So I don't know that there's too many in front of them that have better wins than those two. So I think that's where they're getting a little bit of disrespect. Iowa State in the top 10, that's certainly deserved. And those two don't play in the regular season. So if you're looking for how the Big 12 can get 2 playoff teams, well, there you go. Those two go play in the championship game, unbeaten. They play tight, and then both of them get the nod. That's the simplest path to the Big 12, getting 2 teams into the playoff is Iowa State and BYU at this point. But, there's other scenarios. That's just the most clear-cut one. But, yeah, Colorado, that was an excellent game. Great win by Kansas State, and they're one of those that could be in those other scenarios with just 1 loss right now. Avery Johnson growing a lot from that BYU trip and just the team as a whole from looking like they were deer in headlights to handling the road really, really well. Even though the atmosphere wasn't maybe quite what it was in Provo, it was still electric based on everything that we saw and heard. And that was a great effort from Colorado as well, especially given that they were by the end without many of their top players. I've always given Shedeur respect, and so I'll continue to do that. I'm glad that others are, not going that same narrative early in the year of like, oh, Colorado this and that, and now just watch Colorado, you're like, damn, they're actually pretty good. Like they're pretty entertaining, and I hope that they get healthy because they are a fun watch, and they bring eyeballs to the league, and they're also a good team when they're fully healthy. So that was a crushing loss, but a great win for K-State that really saw Avery Johnson take a big step forward. Obviously, guys like Giddens were tremendous, and, Kleiman had to be over the moon with that one. But Colorado, all eyes are definitely on those injuries right now.
And go ahead.
They got to be able to run the ball, though. I mean, they really do. Like, if they want to get back in the conference race, like, they've got to do it more often. But they found ways around it, but especially at the end of games, they need to be able to run the ball and take the clock down.
Well, and there's a couple of teams in the conference, of course, who might have a chance to dip their toes in that top 25 water. One of them, Baylor, plays in Lubbock this weekend, and Joey McGuire, head coach, will join us here in just a moment. And yet, back to the Cam Rising drama. I mean, I hate it for the guy. He didn't look good at all Friday night. I got home in time to watch a lot of the end of that game. I thought he looked old, he looked rusty, and he is. And a huge win for Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils. Out indefinitely, Isaac Wilson will be the starter moving forward. And yet more now on when is he coming back. And if I'm sorry, he's had a really some nice moments in his career. But if I am Utah, it's time to move forward and not always wonder who's available. If he's available, fine. If he can play, fine. But they now move forward, and that was a really nice win for Arizona State.
It's almost as if you're 25 or 26 years old and aren't in the NFL yet. Maybe you're not as good as we thought.
Well, he's had a couple of years where his injuries would have affected perhaps him being drafted, correct?
Yeah, but also –
and now here we are again.
Okay, if he's been hurt so much that he can't go to the league and he's got to come back and play, well, the injuries are a thing. Now he's injured again at the lower leg injury, according to Kyle Whittingham. You know, this is, you know, it's always a young man's game, and maybe you'd get too old to play college football. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working out for most.
Well, one thing that we're not mentioning is that he technically could come back from an 8th year, and they are undecided on that. So I sure as hell hope he does not. I think that would be bad for the sport, and I think that Cam Rising at this point, needs to either go to the NFL if that's even a possibility, or semi-pro or whatever, man. But I just think at this stage, like it's getting ridiculous if we're talking about an 8th year for him, and especially given that there's no proof that he could come back and actually be able to last, because he can't last now. What's another year going to do on top of that? Wish him the best, and I'll say this. The first thing I think about that game is not about Cam Rising, is that was a great win for Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State. That was a program-building win. They are sitting in a really nice spot right now, and they're believing, and they've got some talent. And I think, you know, just so long as Sam Levitt keeps progressing and Scadaboo stays healthy, like there's something to this team, and they're going to win some more games down the stretch. So that was a huge win just for a program rebuilding. So I've been a big fan of Kenny Dillingham's. We've mentioned that several times over the last few months, and it's you know, easy to continue to feel that way about the direction that he's taken the Sun Devils. But with Rising, that was hard to watch. Like, that was one where even the staunchest Kyle Whittingham supporters are like, what are we doing? Like, why is he in the game? He looks terrible. He's clearly hurt. I don't know how that hit on the sidelines took the toll that it did. Like, I mean, that screwed him up beyond anybody's comprehension. And then for him to come back and then get hurt in a seemingly different way, it's like, are you serious? Like, what are we doing here? And then to stay in the game, clearly unable to move very much, nothing on his throws, taking hits. And I don't know, man, that was just all very strange. It was almost like they were trying to prove the point of, like, see how hurt he is? And it's like, we got it. Like, take him out of the game now because he's clearly very hurt. Like, can Isaac Wilson not come in at this point? And they just left him out there. So I commend Cam Rising for the toughness. Thanks, Kyle Whittingham, for proving to us how hurt he is. But, like, take his ass off the field, man. Like, this isn't cutting it. So not surprised to see the news today. Hate that for him. Hate that for Utah. It definitely derailed their season. But we don't need to see this ran back again.
Yeah, I sometimes think that we're all too enamored with the Willis Reed type kind of thing of the world.
That was 3 years ago.
But, like, you know, the guy comes in and guts it out. Kirk Gibson.
He played about 2 minutes in that game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Kirk Gibson came in and had one at bat and a pinch hitting role and hit a home run. But sometimes, and I think we're starting to see the shift in this, that when the trainer and the doctor say he's hurt and he goes, I'm not, go, hey, don't listen to him. He's trying to play. Yep. That's admirable, but do it. I'll point to Mike Elko and Riley Leonard last year. Riley Leonard gets hurt in that game against FSU. They're in control. He was trying to run up and down the sideline, and Mike Elko's like, you saw him go, I love you.
Yeah,
but this is not going to happen.
It's like a fighter, Joe Frazier against Ali in the last Thrilla in Manila, when even his trainer finally just said, man, no, I'm not letting you go out. Because he would have gone out there, and he couldn't see his eyes, and he was a warrior. But there's a time when you have to just throw in the towel. Real quickly before we get Joey McGuire, how about Scadaboo in Arizona State? Here's a note. He's the offensive player of the week in the Big 12. But how about this note? As good as Ashton Genty has been at Boise State, and he is unbelievable, has he been taken out of games they've been winning so much, and probably has lost 4 to 6 quarters of play. The one player who has had more broken or missed tackles this year, other than Ashton Genty at 48, is Scadaboo from Arizona State, 49. And I watched that game. That is one. He ought to be a part of the Marines. That's the way he plays football. With all due respect, I'm not making light of that. He plays violent, and and it's just fun to watch him. golly.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy you could see playing for like Army or Navy or something and not skipping a beat. But, yeah, he's just an incredibly fun player to watch, one of the more entertaining players in the Big 12 and in college football as a whole as well. He and Taj Brooks have definite argument about, running back one in the league this year, but I imagine both will be on that first team all Big 12. Certainly if the season ended today, that would be the case. Maybe K-State has something to say about that ultimately, but like those two are pretty fair choices at this point as the top two running backs in the league. And he's the heart of that team. Sam Levitt's done some good things, and defensively they've done some good things, and Jordan Tyson on offense has made some big plays. But, I mean, that team goes as Scadaboo goes, and that was certainly the case when they really needed him on Friday night as well. He helped, put that game over the top and seal it, and especially the one touchdown run that he had the cameraman captured it. I don't know who to credit there, but they had the video of the face-to-face of, like, watching him break all the tackles in slow motion, and it was really, really cool to see somebody capture that and get to really see it slowed down and just how incredible his balance is. He's got tremendous balance, obviously very physically tough, and, yeah, that was a massive win for them. Banged up rising or not, that's the kind of win that Kenny Dillingham needs for this program to keep building, and so building they are, and we'll see what happens with Utah the rest of the way. But I know there were more than just Sun Devils fans who were at least smiling a little bit seeing that result based on how the offseason went with all the Utah fans that were seemingly leaning into the role of villain and anti-Big 12 and all of that.
They were going to run the conference, and they've lost to two former Pac-12 teams, so that could be an excuse for them. Carson Hansen. Now, he's had almost 100 yards the last two games. Here's another guy that's coming up and is a freaking battering ram for Iowa State. And they've got three running backs, Jackson, Sama. They have dudes, man. But he is, oh, my goodness, I've watched him against West Virginia, and he is an absolute battering ram.
If Iowa State had to get home through a mountain in West Virginia, they could have done it with him the other day. By the way, as an unofficial Dallas Cowboys scout, one that they don't pay or ask my opinion, I'm looking at two positions for them this year. It's defensive tackle and running back, and Cam Scadaboo is on my approved list.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12 is loaded with running backs.
I think our next guest,
Yep.
a little